This is the Tom Bigby Tales, and I'm your host, Shannon Evans. I write about a small town in northeast Mississippi called Columbus, and sometimes I write about the rest of the state. Tonight, I want to talk about um, the Columbus Housing Authority and some issues that they're having, starting with their audit, and then we'll talk more about the the uh, the condition of the units and people I've been speaking with. So let me share my desktop. And here we go. We are going to start with the audit. So this will be the 2023 audit. That is the most recent audit that is complete with the Columbus Housing Authority. Now, this audit was done by an organization called Smith Marion. They're out of Murfreesboro, Franklin, Tennessee, Murfreesboro. And they are an auditing firm that works extensively with public housing authorities, and that's their bread and butter. And this is the results of theirs that was done it was completed in September, I think, of 2024. And then it was brought back to the Housing Authority organization for them to see. Now, what's interesting is the Housing Authority Board of Commissioners only had this for a very short time. They did not see the complete report, and they did not know that they had some significant deficiencies. So let's start with discussing what this says. So the first section that we're going to look at, and I'm not going through, there's like 46 pages. A lot of it is just discussing what are the properties, what are the accounts, what do they manage, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to get to the summary of the auditor's findings. So the first thing you need to understand is that the auditors come in and they make an audit after the unaudited reports are submitted by the organization. So it would have been Columbus Housing Authority would have, or each year is required to send in their unaudited paperwork, their bookkeeping, their whatever, to this portal through, I think it's called React, through HUD. And then the auditors come in afterwards and they assess all the information and they pull it all together. And that's called the audited submission. So what we're going to find out is that they didn't make their unaudited submission as they were required to in 2023. Now, Robert Graythree took over, and this was his responsibility to submit, and either he didn't know how, he didn't ask for how, he ignored the guidelines. We don't know. We don't know exactly what happened, but it fell through the cracks. And this is the first time that I can find, after going through previous audits, where they actually had any insufficiencies that would have to be addressed. So let's look at this. And let me turn off my phone so it doesn't ring. Okay. So there's the section 1 is the summary of the auditor's results. And they did not, in their internal controls over financial reporting, they didn't have any material weaknesses, but they did have significant deficiencies identified. And they're in their federal awards, they didn't have any material weaknesses. But as you can see, they do have significant deficiencies identified. Then it says any audit findings disclosed that are required to be reported in accordance with 2 CFR 200. In other words, the way they report, they have to report it anyways, and it gets flagged by HUD. So let's go on down to section 2. Section 2 is the financial statement findings, and their internal controls were in non-compliance. What does that mean? Well, there's certain criteria that they're supposed to meet in their reporting. Their financial data schedule, their FDS submission for unaudited financials are due within 2 months after the fiscal year end. That was the piece that I was explaining. That's the unaudited. And it wasn't done. And then the FDS audited submission, which is what we're looking at here, are due 9 months after the fiscal year ends. And the Federal Audit Clearinghouse reporting package is due 30 days after receipt of the auditor's reports, or 9 months after the end of the fiscal year. And there's CFRs, there's guidelines that guide this. Under the condition, the management missed the deadline for its unaudited REACT submission. Well, I find out is they didn't do it. The auditors had to help them to submit it. And they did not submit this unaudited submission on time. Clearly, it was late if it was 9 months later. The cause was that management was late in submitting its financial information to its fee accountant. That's their accountant that they're using. That's this Paul West guy in Alabama, would be my understanding. This in part was caused by personnel changes that limited its ability to produce timely and reliable financial data. Well, I don't know if I buy that. That may just be a Robert excuse. You have to remember, he's been the accountant there for quite a few years, and he's gone to all these trainings, and he should have known this. And he didn't ask for any help. Maybe, I don't know. None of this makes any sense. I just think he just ignored it or just didn't pay attention. The effect of this is the authority will receive a 1-point deduction for every 15 days that the submission is late, up to a maximum of 5 points. So that's 5 times 15. You do the math. The recommendation is the authority needs to improve its internal controls over financial reporting by submitting its financial data on a timelier basis and modify its procedures to minimize its reliance on external spreadsheets for financial information. Those external spreadsheets are the ones that Rusty Walker is maintaining, if I'm understanding correctly. Management views this that they agree with this finding and have outlined their plan of action in their corrective action plan. We'll get to that at the end, and the corrective action plan management is Robert Craythry. Okay, section 3, the federal awards filing. This is the low rent low rent public housing. Woo! And it shows they have significant deficiency of their internal control. Now, remember me talking about them moving money from A to B to C bank accounts, and they were just jumping around, moving money around, and that they were using funds in their general ledger to pay bills over at Chodo when Chodo should have its own ledger, and monies were just willy-nilly coming out of the accounts. Well, it caught up with them here. These are called due to, due from activities. According to PHA accounting brief number 14, due to, due from relationships should not be reported under accrual accounting simply from the result of a PHA using a common checking or working capital account. That's that ledger account. Because of the basic nature of most federal and state programs, resources from one program cannot be used to support the cost of another program. HUD views due tos and due froms reported in PHA's federal programs as possible indicators of non-compliance. Yeah, it's a no-no to. So let's say they have they have one account here and one account here. This one's for this pile of money is for fixing roofs, and this pile of money is for renovating bathrooms. Just throwing it out there that this is where they got this pool of money. So now they started with the roofs, but because they used some of the roofing money in some other project over here that we're not even mentioning, now they're short in the roofing. So they're taking from the draw that's for the housing bathroom repairs. And so now bathroom repair money is being used over here on roofing. And so now they're going to have to, the bathroom repair money is going to have to steal from another pile of money. So it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, essentially. HUD views these as no-nos, big no-nos. They do not like this. That is a form of non-compliance and malfeasance and a whole bunch of other stuff. The authority has interfund receivables and payables that have not been repaid as of fiscal year end. This results in certain programs having a negative cash balance as of fiscal year end. Now, remember, I did tell you they had a whole bunch of bounce checks. Yikes. The authority reported a material 549,444 in total, 496,338 in PH program amount of interfund receivables and payables, which is a significant red flag for HUD reviewers. The authority was not effectively monitoring and managing their interfund program balances in order to ensure their programs were not spending funds they do not have. The use of due to, due from transactions reported in the authority's financials net to some programs have negative cash balances, which could signify to HUD that one or more programs have used resources to cover the cost of another program. Oopsies. The recommendation is the authority should expand its controls over cash reconciliations to include a step to verify if a program, fund, or component unit is accurate along with the entire cash pool. Also, interfund should be repaid monthly at a minimum. And the management agrees with this finding, and they have this corrective action. Okay, so these are the previous years. The previous year's filings, they had no findings, nothing reported. They were squeaky clean. But the one we're looking at is 2023, and it has issues. Now, here's the management corrective action plan. All right, here we are. The following steps will be taken regarding the financial statement FDS submission and interfund repayment. Guess what? One of my soon-to-be public records requests is going to be, I want to know that they actually did these things and how they did it. I want to see where it's documented. So in the financial statements, they will understand deadlines. They will become familiar with the submission deadlines for both unaudited and audited financial data. We'll talk about that more in a minute. They're going to create a timeline so that includes all key dates and milestones and leading up to the submission deadline so that they can have an internal review, blah, blah, blah. They're going to assign responsibilities. They're going to clearly define roles and responsibilities within their team to ensure that the submission process is covered. Then they're going to have some regular check-ins along the way so they can address any issues early, yada, yada, yada. Then they're going to use those HUD tools. Well, there's no other way to submit this stuff without using the HUD tools. They have to use the FDS submission upload tool, and I don't know what the heck. Anyways, I digress. Perform completeness checks before submitting. They're going to perform a submission completeness check to ensure all required data is accurate and complete. They're going to request extensions if needed, and they're going to have backup documentation. That's a big one. In the interfund repayment section, they're going to identify interfund transactions. They're going to list all interfund transactions. This includes payables, payroll, reimbursements, etc. They're going to record their transactions and ensure all interfund transactions are recorded in the general ledger. Then they're going to reconcile balances of all interfund accounts between each fund. They're going to investigate any discrepancies and make necessary adjustment entries to correct any errors. And then they're going to maintain thorough documentation for all interfund transactions. Well, now we've already seen the ledger for 2024 into 2025, and they are not doing that. So I'm going to be asking for this. We shall see. And it is signed respectfully by Robert, grade 3, the executive director. Now, what's most interesting about this is, so I guess it was in April, grade 3, March or April meeting minutes, and grade 3 went to the board and said, it's time to get a new auditor up here because we've been using these auditors forever. We probably ought to try somebody new, just get a little fresh and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, the reason why they had to get a new auditor, and I I don't see it anywhere in the meeting minutes that he told them this is why they had to find a new auditor, was because Smith Marion fired them. Yes, you heard me right. Smith Marion, the auditors they have been using for several years, at least 4 to 5 years, fired them for not doing things on time, starting with these submissions that were due in September. They weren't really happy with their client. I have never heard of a client whose money was green getting fired. That means that they must have been really unresponsive and difficult to work with, that Smith Marion has fired them. So the 2024 audit hasn't even started yet because they've only just gotten bids back. And I think their last meeting, I would guess they probably selected from those bids who would be their next auditors. So 2024 is not going to be ready anytime soon. I'm guessing they're already late on the things they were supposed to submit. So I find that interesting. Just an update. I sent a public records request to Columbus Housing Authority yesterday. Um, uh, I wanted the inspections and the repairs and the reports and all that on that housing unit that I went into as guests of the family that lives there. And we're living with so much mold and so much mildew, and an air conditioning unit that hadn't been working in over a month and had not been attended to or repaired until pretty much until it went on it went on Facebook. Their friend had posted the pictures, which is how that came to my attention. So on Thursday of last week, the pictures were posted of the problems in their housing unit. And they had mold, they had mildew, they had their air conditioning wasn't working. They there's no the bathroom is just, the mildew and the mold is so bad, and uh in the kitchen the washing machine will not drain out the drain pipe that goes from the machine to the wall, but they're having to just hang their hose in the kitchen sink. The floor tiles in their kitchen are just brittle and broken, and old asbestos tile underneath is exposed, and some of that's broken, and it's just not a good situation. Their ceiling fan is hanging drooping like it's melting. It looks like something out of a Disney movie. It's just their house is clean, it's spotless, but the condition, the maintenance of the conduits and the bullet holes in the wall from out that were shot from outside in, from an altercation from somewhere else. It was just horrible. So anyways, that went up on the internet on Thursday. Friday morning, they had the assistant executive director and the director of housing maintenance knock on their door, and they didn't say, "Hey, we saw you had a problem. I'm so sorry nobody's answered your calls. I don't know. What can we do to help you?" No, that wasn't what they did. They shut up and said, "Why did you put those pictures on the internet?" Now, there was nothing that identified their unit or themselves. So how did they know that it was theirs? Anyways, the women were worried, and the children, they were worried that they would be evicted. I went over there on Saturday. They had repaired the air conditioning somewhat. It was a hot day, so maybe it was struggling to keep up. But the house was still 77, 78 to 80 degrees. And while I was standing there, housing followed me into the neighborhood and parked behind me on a Saturday at noon and followed me into the house and just said he just wanted to check the air conditioning, et cetera, et cetera. And then he tried to intimidate me, and anyways, it was just ridiculous. However, the good news is, um, I contacted the commissioners. They were there Monday morning. They went through the house. They agreed that there were issues. And as of today, there were three there were three trucks out there working. I saw another window unit in what would be the children's bedroom, and it appears that they're trying to meet the requirements. I don't know what the bathrooms look like yet. We shall see. Anyways, as a result of that, um, uh, I understand that the executive director went in there and he wasn't aware that their houses look like that. Isn't that interesting? Doesn't know his properties. So my public records request that was sent last night was that I asked for the inspections of that unit for the last 5 years. Who made the inspections, who took the repair orders, and what were the resolutions. So I'm curious to see what comes of that. And then after that, I think we'll be asking some questions about these promises he made in his corrective action plan. And then I have another public records request that I plan to do about some of the monies that have been spent or not, or spent and nothing to show for it. I do plan to continue following up on this. I also plan to go to their meeting tomorrow at the Housing Authority. It is a public meeting. I encourage you to go too. It's at the Columbus Housing Authority at 5 p.m. at their fancy dancy offices on 4th. So that's all I have tonight. I'm still being stalked by the people from the cemetery, from the city workers with the cemetery today. They tried to block us in, but that's a whole nother story. I'll save that for our Facebook Live probably. That's my update. And oh, my other update is I sent a whole list of content of my of the things that I have already brought forth on previous podcast episodes, the documentation of what I have from public records requests. I sent those to the HUD, to the Inspector General, and am now working with an investigator out of Jackson. She's very good and very much on top of it. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is from FOIA number 3, which was about the roofing. I asked for specific documents, and I wasn't given them. I was given a whole bunch of documents, but didn't answer the questions that I specifically asked. I asked for copies of all inspections. So when you do the roofing, there should be a before and an after inspection. Before, this is what we need, identify an issue. Then you go get the bids, you put up the new roof, you get the contract. And by the way, the contract, we're missing a lot of the pieces that I didn't get that weren't there. And then you're supposed to inspect the final product and then you write the check. And there's no exit inspections that I can see. I also asked for the front and back copy of each check, and they just sent me the invoice of what the check number was and the amount. They never sent, I asked for the disposition of removed roofing, the proof of that, none of that's there. The copies of the licenses for the roofers, nah, nothing there. And the copy of city permits, I don't have that. I also found in all that documentation that I did go through that Rusty is always listed as a contract administrator, which is interesting because he's never, to my knowledge, even been to Columbus. So as a contract administrator, he can do it without being here, but somebody still has to go and to make sure that the work is actually done and done to specifications. So, yeah, I don't have any of those either. I don't have the bid specifications, and I certainly don't have the copy of the ads, which leads to another discussion. I sent a note to the Board of Commissioners president, and I said, or she actually sent it to me, and she said, well, we don't have to have copies of all ads unless the contract was for over $250,000 per HUD. Well, HUD, but HUD doesn't supersede Mississippi state law or federal law. Mississippi state law says anything $50,000 or over requires advertising if for bids. So if you have the bids and they got to go out, then we need the ad. So where's the ad? And so I said, if they don't have it, then I want it in writing that they don't have that they didn't do it. That's where I stand. That's what I know. So next time you see our old buddy, Robert Graythree, ask him why he didn't tell his board that their auditor did not bother to renew the contract because they fired their client, the Columbus Housing Authority. Until next time, this is the Tom Bigby Tales, and I'm Shannon Evans. Good night.